Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of My Black is Transnational. My name is Dr. Kalechi Bailey, and I thank you all for listening. And I'm very excited for this particular episode because there's so many exciting things that we have to share. If this is your first time listening to My Black is Transnational, please rate, subscribe, and review the podcast. This podcast is available on all platforms, so whatever your favorite podcast listening app is, we are definitely sure to be there. Really would love to hear your feedback and your thoughts. If you have any feedback for me, you can email us at blacktransnational17@gmail.com, or you can follow me on Instagram at blacktransnational_, and you can feel free to shoot me a DM or follow me and share comments on my Instagram story about the recent episode that I dropped. So on this episode, we will be joined by a special guest, Dr. Omavi Bailey, who will be talking about his experiences as far as reconnecting back to Africa and how he became a transnational, although he was born an African American, and his experiences, or what the work I should say that he's doing now to reconnect other people from Africa or the diaspora, or even those in America, back to Africa, as far as what they call the doorway of return. And just to kind of give you a little bit of foreshadowing, this conversation that we have, Dr. Omavi and I, is a very powerful conversation, in my opinion, very deep, very enriching, and can hit some people on an emotional level. But I thought it was a very powerful interview and a lot of powerful statements that were shared by Dr. Bailey. And I'm very excited for the content, and I really would love to hear your feedback. I really think that this episode really sheds some light as to how we as a Black community can truly reclaim our humanity. And for those who feel lost or who felt want to reconnect back to their ancestors or to their roots, this episode really speaks on how African Americans or those from the diaspora, those who just want to reconnect back to Africa, not from just a physical standpoint, but even from a spiritual standpoint, what you can do in order to do that, and how he, Dr. Bailey, through his organization, Prometra, work on trying to heal the wounds from the past through not just medicine, but also through action and community organizing. So, very excited. I really would love to hear your feedback again. And without any further ado, here we go. All right, everybody, welcome to My Black is Transnational. Our guest for today is a really, really good brother. Very inspirational to my thoughts as far as giving me the confidence to start this show. And it's somebody that I really, really was pushing to try to get on this show. So it's my pleasure to introduce to y'all Dr. Omavi Bailey, who is a doctor, a physician by trade, but does a lot of other interesting, fascinating work that I really want you all to hear about. So, man, Omavi, brother, welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, man, thank you for having me, man. I really appreciate it. It's an honor, and to be a part of something so groundbreaking and so necessary.
Man, yo, thank you so much. The pleasure is mine, and just very good to have you. So if you could just take a couple of minutes to just tell us what you're about. What do you do? What are you working on right now? I know you're a physician by trade, but what are the things that you're working on so far?
Well, yeah, I do quite a few different things, but the most important thing that I'm a part of is an organization called Prometra. I'm a part of Prometra. I sit on the board of Prometra USA, and what we do is really to try to preserve, uplift, and promote the traditional cultures and traditions and traditional African medicine, culture, and values that existed tens of thousands of years, and that are really in danger of being lost as a result of colonialism, slavery, and many other things. And so we really are working to preserve that in all of its areas that we can find it. So both in Africa and in the diaspora. And this organization, as we do this work, it also opens a lot of doors and opportunities for collaboration and communication between the diaspora and the continent, and a lot of solutions for problems that we have today from our traditional knowledge. And so that work is really awesome, man. It's exciting. It's allowed me to really gain some deep relationships with some very powerful and incredible individuals in our culture, both in Africa and in the diaspora. And we've been able to do some really good work in the realm of traditional medicine to really find solutions for diseases that Western medicine falls short in being able to treat or heal.
Man, that's
So
interesting.
that is a lot of the work. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but that's amazing, and thanks for sharing that. And it just kind of leads me, because one of the things that we talk about in my Black is Transnational is obviously bridging the gap, and we're going to go into a
Mm-hmm.
deeper discussion as far as bridging that gap between Africa and the diaspora and America and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious as to you being a physician that that does work in that particular style of medicine, and you're also working with an organization that focuses on that traditional medicine. And how are you trying to bridge that gap?
Brother, I love the term bridge that gap because I see myself as a bridge.
Mm.
Before I became a doctor, I understood that my role, my purpose in life is to be a bridge between Africa and the diaspora.
Mm.
And it was it was actually one time I was in South Africa at a biomedical science conference, and I was invited as a part of one of the guests to accompany the keynote speaker. And we sat down and we talked. And this is a wise man. He's a mentor of mine, and he really helped me understand my role as a bridge. Mm-hmm. So when you talk about how do we bridge that gap, well, any bridge, in order for it to be stable, it has to have a strong pillar on either side that allows the bridge to connect, right? So in order to do that, we have to really plant those roots down and go deep to those roots where they are on each side. And when it comes to how I'm able to kind of play this role as a physician and also come back to these traditional systems, it's a challenge. It is a bit of a game. You have to. It's a tightrope walk at times. However, we really is as limited as Western medicine has become. Some of the basic fundamental features that it's built upon actually still came out of Africa. Mm. When you look at the Ebers Papyrus in Egypt, for example, when it describes the function of the heart, and cardiovascular system and these things, I mean, that predated Western medicine by thousands and thousands of years. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now, the Western philosophical approach to medicine, healthcare, healing, or treatment of patients has a lot of limitations because of the way the science has been developed, but on the principles that it was developed on. It does not acknowledge, anything about spirituality. Mm. Does not really fundamentally acknowledge any mind-body connection, and it cannot measure, love, intuition, the dynamics of life, the energy of life. It does not have the ability to measure that. Mm-hmm. So it falls short many times, especially when it comes to mental health issues, as we see in this country, is very pervasive. It also falls short, even in the approach, let's say, to treating infection. So when, in the Western approach, of course, during the scientific revolution in Europe and the whole Renaissance period, mm-hmm. There was still a lot of oppression happening in the world. Yeah. Let's not get it twisted. Yeah. I mean, slavery was still, slavery, colonialism, and just genocide was still happening. Yeah. So in order to really develop a science, the ethics of that science also has a connection to the philosophy on which you investigate things. Mm-hmm. It colors your lens, right? So you can, on one hand, come up with a very humane science and a very good way to heal things, and on the other hand, be disregarding life, every day. So what I see happen is you have philosophers like Descartes and Louis Pasteur, and as they begin to try to understand these organisms and also separate the mind from the body and look at the body as a mechanism, what ends up happening is you develop solutions that have no problem with killing an organism. You have an infection, you have a bacteria in your system. I create an antibiotic. That antibiotic will kill that organism, and you'll be free of the infection. Right. But that's not what really happens. You kill the organism, It mutates, comes back stronger, becomes a superbug, and you no longer have an effective treatment. So that approach of being able to kill organisms is not the same approach that we use in traditional African medicine. I use that traditional African medicine broadly, and I can speak about particular traditions, but really across sub-Saharan Africa, that approach is not the approach. You don't kill organisms; you remove them from the body.
It sounds like you're talking from that angle that you just brought up, the pastures of the world. It seems like they kill the organism, but they're focusing more on that organism, but they're not necessarily focused on that healing process. So it seems like that other angle might be focused more on healing instead of just destroying an organism, which can come back and be able to be, develop immunity to whatever treatment. It's not about that. It's about healing the body holistically. Am I correct, or?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And it comes down to the philosophy is very important to analyze, because if you say, I think, therefore I am, then that means there's really no value of the other person or the other living being, whether it be nature, animal, or human. It doesn't matter. I am because of me. But if you say I am because we are, then you have a different approach to how you resolve conflict, how you resolve problems, how you bring about health, and how you resolve illness. And if you look at health as an equilibrium or balance, and you don't look at it as a state of just well-being or something like that, like the WHO definition, CDC definitions, they continue to evolve these definitions, but it started off as the absence of disease, health as the absence of disease. That's not the African, and I use that term broadly, but the African definition. The definition, for example, in Tado civilization definitions like in Benin, you would say health is the ability to laugh and to cry. This is a philosophical discussion where you say health is the ability to laugh and to cry. It means there's this balance, that you are able to achieve. And it's not just Africa. It's really a lot of indigenous cultures around the world. It's universal in many ways. But when you don't see health as a form of bringing about balance in all, to the organism, then you say, I kill this, I kill that, and that's why, in medicine, you'll see a patient who'll be on so many different medications, so many different side effects, because we have created so many different silos and specialties that don't really recognize the interaction of all things for the organism's well-being, or the organism's fundamental health of the organism as a balance. So that is a different approach, and it really is a huge problem today, because we're looking at a threat. Look, you remember Ebola?
Yeah.
Look at HIV, Ebola. We're talking about viruses now, and we also have KCC and these other organisms, these superbugs that are multi-drug resistant organisms, and the CDC speaks of the threat of a huge epidemic or pandemic because of the widespread use of antibiotics. So it's not just philosophy, but that philosophy also basically connects to major problems and threats that exist today.
So one of the things that stood out to me in what you said was the concept of I think, therefore we are. And it seems to kind of speak to that interdependence, that community building aspect that needs to happen in the Black community. And since we're on the topic of health, and we'll switch moving forward, but since we're still on that topic of health, what are some ways as far as reducing the utilization of antibiotics and the improvement of more behavior related, spiritual, traditional type of practices? What are ways that your organizations are promoting to people as far as practices they should engage in and behaviors they should try to take on?
Oh, it's a very good question. I wanna just make a small correction. It's the Western philosophy is I think, therefore I am, and the African is I am because we are.
Oh, okay. I apologize.
And when when we look at ways and practices that we can use to that we can take on to help us have better health. You know, there are some simple things that we can do, but let me tell you, it does require. I think it's best understood when you step outside of the philosophical framework or the Western idea of health, and you come into another way of seeing things. And I'm just going to say this African perspective, for lack of a better way to classify this. But first of all, when you look at the African way of thinking, is you have vertical and horizontal relationships. So you have your vertical family. I'm sorry, you have your horizontal family. This is your brother, your sister, your mom, your family. Then you also have your ancestral lineage. Mm-hmm. And there is a very important role of being able to be connected vertically and horizontally. And if you don't have both of those relationships intact, it really can cause a lot of problems of misunderstanding really of who you are and what your family really needs. So one thing is honoring our ancestors and having that connection to our ancestors. Very big, and it's not just African culture. I've seen it in Asia. I've seen it in the Caribbean, of course, and I've seen a lot of Native Americans here in the United States. Mm-hmm. So that's very important, and I want to speak on that in regards to some of the atrocities that have happened and continue to happen. So let me just kind of paint this picture for you. Okay. In the African cycle of life, I can walk you through that cycle, but it's one in which we believe that life is a cycle, and we die, we're born, we're reborn, mm-hmm. and we're not the only ones who believe that. And we've demonstrated, and even shown how this works in many different examples. However, part of that process is not actually just only physically dying and coming back, but also the process of going through birth, rites of passage, marriage, initiation, death. All these things are kind of these moments where we are reborn, and we renew, we get to another part of our life cycle. Mm. Now, additionally, when you look at this cycle of life and you think about, well, if there's a cycle of life where we're born again and you die and you become an ancestor, you come back, then what happens when you have mass killing or you have genocide, and like what happened in the slave trade, and all these bodies and these souls were just lost, unnamed, and I say unnamed, we don't know their names, but they were the family of people who were taken. And so what some of the elders are saying in Benin, for example, is that when you have this kind of genocide and all of these people also did not have the appropriate burials and were not able to continue that life cycle, mm-hmm. you have this kind of backlog of souls. Because what happens when you're born again, when you say, you go through your life cycle, you're getting better. Humanity improves. Mm. And what part of what they see is the problem with currently in humanity is that we have there's too much killing, and it's not the appropriate process to allow humans to evolve and improve, and to become better. So there are things to do to try to help that happen. And so part of that is connecting to our ancestors. So when we go to Africa in the work that we do, we even help to facilitate what we call the way of remembering. And we walk in the footsteps of our ancestors who died and were taken and who were tortured in the Middle Passage. And we go and we go to that place and we try to connect and feel that pain. And we walk through the door of no return. We are making an effort to reconnect and to participate in the tradition that will help those souls reestablish their life cycle and continue to evolve. Now, we also have a door of return, the only door of return in Africa where we welcome the diaspora to return back to reconnect to its motherland and to help to also resolve, a lot of that pain and that suffering that continues to haunt us today, and also lead us to break that cycle and to really improve, to kind of rehumanize and reconnect and improve ourselves.
Yeah. So
So,
that's sorry to cut off, but that just stood out because I was gonna ask about the doorway of return, and to me that resonates because one of the biggest things that I've personally shared on this show at the beginning of it was that my biggest goal is to be able to, as you said, being a bridge. I also aspire to be a bridge like you are in terms of connecting our African American brothers and sisters here in the United States who may not have that ability to connect directly with their roots, but being able to connect them back to Africa. And it just seems like what you are doing, what you all are doing with the doorway of return, just illustrates that and really emphasize that. And I just kind of want to know, where did that idea come from? Because that is just it's fantastic, bro. Like, I can't even lie. Like, that's something that I believe hits people not just on a physical but an emotional level, to be able to just
oh, it's deep, brother.
get to reconnect, bro. Like, man, can you just expound on that a little bit?
It's deep. It's deep because, you know, first of all, it's a UNESCO protected UNESCO site, right? So it's recognized, it's trademarked, it's real, like, and it's recognized. You see these doors of no return, and it's like it really is kind of interesting. So if you go to Ghana, you can see in Cape Coast they got a dungeon there. They got Elmina. You go to Senegal, you see Gorée Island. And you go to Benin, where so many millions of our ancestors left, were taken. And it's just a big open space, and there's a road that leads down. And this at this point on the road, this happened. There's a tree of forgetfulness. There's all these steps of how they took us down this road. And then you get to this open beach that leads out to the Atlantic Ocean. And there was, in memory of what happened, there's this big door of no return. And I understand what that's about. And, the door of no return to symbolize, what happened. But it was the president of Prometra International that was able to take the name through a vision he had, actually a dream he had, a vision he had to create the pathway for the return of the children of Africa, right?
Yeah.
And he acquired the land on that beach, that same beach in Ouidah, Benin, and built a large door of return, huge door of return, with a big statue of a Mother Africa welcoming her children back home from the diaspora, and a museum of artifacts chronicling the history, both pre-colonial, pre-slavery, slavery, and the colonial history that happened here, so we'll never forget. And when we do this pilgrimage, when people come back to walk in the footsteps of their ancestors and reconnect and to try to reconcile, what has happened here and to move forward, you go through the door of no return. And then you go down to this massive beach where, when I tell you, brother, I first went there when I was 20 on this pilgrimage. And, I went down, cried like a baby, man. I didn't know what to experience. I was 20. I knew some history. I thought I knew I was going. I got down there, man, it broke me, boy. I tell you, it's so powerful. I've never seen nobody walk through there and come back the same. And then you go down to the beach, right? And I say the beach, but as far as your eyes can see, it looks like an endless ocean. It is. It's huge. It's deep. It's profound. There's a highway of bones that connects us from that beach all the way. to North America, a highway of bones created by the bones of our ancestors, those who were thrown overboard, those who jumped overboard, those who did not make it, and when you stand, when I stood right there, let's say I probably was like 30, 40 feet from the actual water, let's say 20, 30 feet from the water, man, I was there with an elder and we started praying and just to speak to my ancestors, like, I feel you. I'm here. I've come back. You're not forgotten. That water from that ocean looked like it just came at me. It came all the way up to me and hit me in my chest. My eyes were closed when I was praying. Oh my, it knocked me down. And it's a story that a lot of people tell. That space is so living. It's so alive. You can't really put it into words. It's a feeling you get when you're there that something happened here. Something very powerful is still here. And that the place knows you. It's like you've been there before. And then you walk back up that beach. As you walk away from the ocean, you come in to the door of return. And you're welcomed. There's music playing. Dignitaries of the traditional societies are there to embrace you, to pray for you, to welcome you, to honor you. And it's like a whole nother feeling, And so that is what that door of return represents, just the beginning. Because then once you walk through that door, now you're able to enter into a process to regain your humanity. And this is very important because I was learning from the elders, like, what does this place mean? What's the significance of door of return? And what can we achieve by doing this? And yes, welcome home, reconnect to your motherland, what's yours, right? But also, it wasn't just the land that was taken from us. Our humanity was taken as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can talk about the lack of humanity of the people who did this to us, but let's also talk about how we're going to get our own humanity back. And so what we don't realize sometimes until we go back home, how far we drifted away. Like how far society has gone from where it was really intended to be and where it began. And the beautiful thing is, when we're home, we also see how easy it is for us to reconnect. Yeah. But at the same time, it's like, wow, I've really been disconnected for a minute. We can pick it up like a homeboy you had that you ain't seen in 10 years. You know what I'm saying? But you got a lot of, you got a lot to catch up on, but it's like, oh, but I'm home though. I get it. So once you're there, it's a process you can start to rehumanize, to heal those wounds that continue to exist in our universal memory.
And that's deep, and that's beyond. I mean, I need to get more information about this to share, because although I mean, the picture you just painted was powerful in its own right, and I know whoever else is listening can probably understand what I'm talking about. Now, I know that this is something that's open for other people to also partake in. So, how do you go about doing that? Because I know some of our listeners would love to hear how to make that reconnection.
Yeah, no problem. First of all, if you're in the United States and you're listening to this, we have Prometra USA. And if you go to www.prometra, that's PROMETRA.org, so www.prometra.org, you can see our website and all the international activities that we do. You'll see a lot about the research that we do on our plant medicines and the work we're doing on that. You'll see the projects we do to preserve traditional African culture and traditions and traditional healing. And then also you'll see Way of Remembering. And that Way of Remembering is a pilgrimage. And we do a big pilgrimage every 2 years where we invite whoever wants to come. I'm gonna tell you, it's interesting.
Hmm.
And before I jump into why it's so interesting, I don't want to miss this point. The next one will be in 2021.
2021. Okay.
2021. However, you can go there any day, any time. If you want to go to Benin, it's open. It's there. There's someone there to open the door for you to walk through the door of return. It's there. It's there, open to the public, and you can see the museum. You can have that experience. The pilgrimage, though, it goes beyond that. Once you come back through that door of return, you get to walk back into the footsteps of your ancestors that before slavery, before colonialism. We go visit some of the oldest villages, temples, shrines, traditional societies, and we walk in as the guests of the dignitaries. So all these doors are open to you to return home in the most beautiful way. And so it's full of celebration. It's full of good food, good people, spirituality, culture, tradition, music, dancing, ceremonies. You get completely immersed back into your culture, and that's how it should be when a child comes home that's been missing for 400-500 years.
Right.
Yeah. So that pilgrimage is not a tourist thing.
Mm.
It is a pilgrimage, and it's likened unto a Muslim going to Mecca.
Mm-hmm.
It's likened unto going not just back to your homeland, but to your origin, and your not just your physical land, but your spiritual reconnection is very important. So,
man,
yeah,
so
that's what it is.
So now, you just kind of touched on all the things that I consider the process of transnationalism, maybe from the reverse angle of an African American connecting back to Africa, and that right there is the process. And I can't even imagine illustrating it any better. But one of the things that I found interesting was that, man, the first time we met was, I actually thought you were African, right? And you were an African immigrant or second generation, whatever the case may be. And, finding out that you were actually born, in the U.S. and African American, and you just made that connection with Africa. And, by trade now, you are considered African. You've made that connection. You have connections to Senegal, Benin. How did you go about doing that, man? Like, what inspired you to make that connection?
Look, I'll put it to you like this. My mother, number one, was instrumental in making sure I had an African identity. I don't know what she was, I don't know what she was thinking when she was doing it. I don't know, but she made sure I knew who I was, who I am. The first thing you do in any culture, I believe, maybe except for America, I think, let me tell you, when I deliver babies at the hospital, you got to have a name before the baby leave the hospital. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And there's no cultural value to that. How are you going to name a child before you even see the child?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of void of the spirituality of it all. And if anyone's, seen the child being born, that is the one thing that lets us know that we're not just physical beings. Like, this is the most, to see a being come from another person, animated with its own energy, with its own expressions and everything. It really should help to reconnect. Like, the question should be asked, where did this person come from? And to have a name without even having a chance to, So my mom gave me the name Omavi. And I think that was very instrumental to me having an identity in America with an African name. And she gave me my consciousness, The truth is, if I have to step back and operate from an African perspective, I say that the souls that are born, our unborn children, have their identity, and in the African perspective is that they've been here before. And so it doesn't really matter where you're born. You are who you are. If you accept this cycle of life in the African thought and this expression of African spirituality, this universal spirituality that basically is saying reincarnation exists, then it doesn't matter where you're born. Your identity, you are who you are. So I say that. Now at the same time, I say that there have been in my life people who have directed me to where I needed to go from a young age. The first time I spent a significant amount of time in Africa was at the age of 19. I studied abroad in Uganda for 6 months. And then that changed my life. Started to understand more about who I am. I couldn't get enough of Africa. By now, I think I've probably been to about 15 countries. And some for a short period of time, some for longer. And I think that that fire was in me to really discover my purpose and my identity. Now, I think that we have to help our children understand who they are. And to get to the real heart of the matter, the world is in trouble. And this is not no theory or paranoid type of, the world is in trouble. Just turn on the news. You got the threat of nuclear war. You have disease and wars going on in many countries in the world. We still have not addressed the damage that's been done in the last 10 years. Destruction of Iraq, destruction of Afghanistan, this is going on in Palestine-Israel conflict, what's going on in Africa, especially now that China's entering Africa. And there's so much going on in the world that's really going in the wrong direction. It's really only one place in the world that I believe can bring all people together. And I believe it's the transnational African responsibility to make that connection happen through Africa. We're everywhere. Yeah. There's no other people dispersed like we're dispersed.
That's facts.
And at the end of the day, everybody really can. I'm trying to tell you that everybody can connect to Europe. Everybody cannot connect to Asia. But in my own personal experience, anybody and everybody can connect to Africa. Africa is the mother. All of us, all life came from Africa. So I talk about humanity. All humans came from Africa. Now, your national identity is another thing. Your spiritual identity is another thing. But scientifically, factually, Africa gave birth to all humanity. So I think we also have a very important responsibility and role and opportunity to help solve problems for all of humanity. As we have suffered and continue to suffer our own problems as a result, actually, of really the lack of humanity outside of Africa. So I think that that's something we have to think about. So what we're trying to do as Prometra to facilitate that is to, one, do the way of remembering to really help, reconnection to our homeland. Number two, because of all of the lives that have been lost in genocide around the world, it's very important that we have a way for people to reconnect to their ancestors and also to help their ancestors, continue the cycle of life. So we're building a temple of the ancestors in Benin, and this is going to be for all people. All people to be able to reconnect to their ancestors and help that continue that cycle of life. Because as I mentioned, it's that cycle of life that helps us improve, and we're seeing the lack of that evolution. We're devolving. Humanity is devolved. We're going backwards. And so that is another one of the importance of the ancestral connection. The second thing that we're doing is building the city of spiritual reconnection. So the spiritual city will be in Benin, in a place called Dotu. and this land that has been given to us by, let's say, the greatest dignitaries in African spirituality and Vodou in Benin. And so this is a place where it will be like I said, like what Mecca is to Muslims. Anybody can come and reconnect. When you understand African spirituality, you understand it's not a religion. Some people may try to make it one.
Right.
It's not religion. It's not religion. It predates religion. Religions have prophets. African spirituality don't have no prophets. You know, this is the reconnection to universal spirituality that can really help the process of rehumanization, you know, and the steps really you have to recognize what's going on in the world. You know, we have to really denounce those things, and then we have to reconcile, you know, with each other and repair the damage so that we can rehumanize, so we can really be humans. Because I think that's something that's missing.
Yeah, yo, that's powerful. And two things stood out to me right there. One is that whole concept of reconciliation, because that was going to lead me to ask you a question, which I will in a little bit. But I also wanted to address the whole concept of separating religiosity and African spirituality, because you'll see in contemporary times that a lot of people who may be even listening to this, or those who may not know, or you may have conversations, try to associate that with religion, and then you start to speak down on it and try to denigrate it by saying this is not with your faith or whatever the case may be. So I like and appreciate the fact that you kind of distinguish both practices. But my question was, as far as reconciliation, it really stands out to me because one of the things that happens here is that gap, that divide between African immigrants here in the North America and African Americans. There's a huge divide, and for someone who is, by all rights, a transnational, what causes that gap? How can we reconcile between both parties? Because there's a huge divide, and in order for us to truly be, in my opinion, a very powerful a nation, a community, whatever you want to call it, a population, in order for it to really achieve that power, that peace, that prosperity, we have to be able to bridge that gap. We have to be able to reconcile. I think that's a powerful word, and I just kind of want to know your thoughts about it, as from someone who's here and has built relations with Africa and relationships with people globally. What does it take?
It takes one being honest. We got to be honest. Too often we don't say what we really feel. We just push things under the rug. You know how it is, especially in the Black community. Mm-hmm. If you're not feeling well, if you're sick, you don't tell nobody. You keep it on the hush. Mm-hmm. We got to be honest, okay? And we have to say what we feel. But let me tell you something. I've never had a problem and never saw a problem of reconciliation between the diaspora and Africa when I actually came to Africa. It's the people that are having that discussion and perpetuating those ideas are the ones who really don't benefit from that reconciliation. Let me explain what I mean. I could tell you the first time at 19 years old when I was in Uganda, I thought I understood what it meant to be a good person, what it meant to be human. I thought I understood what love was to some degree, but I never would have imagined that I would have felt the love, the welcoming, the embrace that Africa gave me when I showed up at 19 years old. My experience, when you're talking to people, I'm not talking about scholars. I'm not talking about politicians. Deal with the people. Go meet the people. Go meet the people. You will see that the diaspora is admired in Africa. And we have been miseducated in the diaspora to think that Africans don't want us to come back. And I'm not going to speak for all Africans. But I'll tell you, when you deal with the people, there's so much love for us, and so they're so proud and fascinated by what we have been able to accomplish, and what we've been able to survive, in the U.S. as they don't even know much about it on the continent. As it's not taught to us here with Africa, the history of Africa, they're also not learning much about the experience and the history of us in the U.S. So that's one thing. Deal directly with the people. Don't. Me personally, I got a policy in my life, man. I go to the. I want to hear it directly from the horse's mouth. I don't do too much secondhand, thirdhand things. Got to find out the people. You're not gonna get the truth until you go right directly to the source. So just go home. Go home and reconnect and see what happens. You'll be welcomed. You'll be welcomed. And the other thing is reconciliation. There are some traumas that have occurred that take a process to heal. But the first step to reconciliation is recognition. We have to recognize the problem. Okay? Then we have to repent. Okay? And what repentance means to me is you got to say, one, how you feel, what hurts, and then we got to admit that, yeah, I did that, or I'm sorry, and let's reconnect. And then you can reach a stage of reconciliation. When it comes to family, another thing about Africa is this, a lot of times you can still find the way to reconcile. Let me give you an example. There's a type of ceremony you can do for a family who has had a trauma or a break or something that has really caused damage to that family unity. And you can do this kind of ceremony to reestablish that family, that reconnection, that unity. All right? We've lost, maybe we have lost that in our distance from our home, being in the diaspora, but it's definitely available back home. So if there is something, it can be resolved. And a lot of things we think about Africa ain't true. They are not true. And the idea that Africa don't want us, they sold us into slavery, that's BS. Okay, that's not true. That's not how it went down. And the more I've had a chance to go deeper into the actual places that existed when this happened, you get to see the complexity of the dynamics. And as I say, not only of the leadership during that period, but also the people. You're literally dealing with your family. Let me give you an example. We're doing this Way of Remembering tour. We have a translator, young brother from Benin, right? He's sharp. He shows up every day early. He's ready to go, and he's sharp. His English is good, and he studies Black culture, which is so awesome. This brother watched the Boondocks. He really looks at the intricacies of diaspora culture, and he's into the thing. He's interpreting. Then, as we get ready to walk through the door of no return, it hits him. He starts crying. That he's standing with the people who come all over here to go through the door of no return. They could be his actual blood. So he himself felt, as he was showing up for work, he himself actually felt the power of what he had forgotten himself. This is called the Way of Remembering. And it works both ways. It's not just for the diaspora, it's for the continent too. So that was a just kind of a powerful example of how that reconciliation happens. It's very powerful. And that reconciliation extends beyond just the African diaspora and the African continental African. I could tell you, a sister from Iraq came on the trip, and she was there to know more about Africa and African spirituality. And she was on the pilgrimage. She had been to Mecca. She's Muslim, okay, devout Muslim. And she was very nervous in the beginning because she really didn't know much about this stuff. And when she went down through the door of no return and in that path, that road of no return that our ancestors had to walk down, she had a memory that her ancestors also participated in the trans-Saharan slave trade. And she broke down.
Wow.
It's super powerful because we're not. This ain't classroom, man. This is real. It's real.
Yeah, well, that's about as real as it gets. I mean, this is a powerful conversation overall, man. I think I'm moved by it. We've had conversations before, but even now talking about it again, it just the image, everything is just it's very moving. It's captivating, and we're kind of running up on time. But there's one other question I'd like to ask you before we kind of wrap up, and just as a transnational now, to you, what do you feel are the benefits of being able to have access to both worlds? What are the benefits? What are the drawbacks for you?
Let me speak on the benefits practically, and some of the bigger things. I'm going to start from the bigger things and then work back to the more practical things.
Okay.
Number one, when we reconnect, you realize who you are, and then you realize your own your purpose and your power. Right. So, what I want to say to all, especially the African diaspora and the continental African, we don't know this, but we're the ones who have to really solve this problem for humanity. That we're still trying to figure out who we are and how we're going to get along and how we're going to reconnect. But actually, the world is waiting on us to actually solve this problem. The world is waiting on us to really solve why the world is going in the wrong direction. Africa can solve that. Africa has the solutions, but we have to come together and we have to lead this process for the whole world. I ain't talking about just black people, the whole world. That's a huge responsibility and role that we need to understand we have to play. Number one. Number two, from the practical perspective, my wife is Senegalese. Her parents are from Benin and Mali. They met in Senegal in school, and she's from Senegal. So she was born and raised in Senegal. Okay. My children and my wife right now in Senegal visiting family. Okay, and if things, and this is, so I'm going to talk about practical. You know how hard it is for a black man to make it in America. Better yet, not have a felony, or a problem, making money or financially or what have you. Good credit. There's an opportunity to be able to operate in this bridge between the diaspora and the continent, to be able to not be limited by the limitations that are placed on us here. You don't have those same limitations there. There are things that you can build and you can do and you can make happen outside of the limitations that are placed on us here that will secure that you have a future. And one thing, when we were in New York, brother, it occurred to me that I wanted to go see Harlem. I wanted to go see what Garvey was, where the Renaissance happened. You go to Harlem today, you'll see Whole Foods, right. A whole bunch of skinny jeans and yoga pants.
Right.
And because we have not been able to secure that our investment and our future here in America will last more than 3 generations.
Wow.
But we can do that in Africa. And they are flocking to Africa. Chinese, European, everybody's coming to Africa to try to take. And we are not even claiming what's really ours and what we can do when we connect the diaspora and the continent. And so personally, practically, I find refuge in security, both financially, family support wise. My wife goes to Africa. She drops the kids off and she can sleep. She can relax. You got community. you know, it's a whole nother level of practical living that 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 really promotes happiness and balance, you know. And it's important to be able to have that. I think it really provides a type of not only a safety net but a security for our future, for our future generations in particular. So I think it is quite practical, and I recommend everybody go back home, and if you can, establish something back home that you know will be there for your great grandchildren.
Man, yo, that's a powerful way. That's a huge exclamation point for me in this conversation, this interview, man. Brother, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, man. I just want to thank you for taking this opportunity to just enlighten us on what's going on, especially because it's Black History Month. Man, I just think that this is a powerful conversation that needs to continue. Maybe not on these airwaves, but also just in other people's homes, among other people, especially that concept of reconciliation. I think that's something that we need to progress on actually doing. It doesn't have to be a spectacle of sorts, but I think these are conversations that need to be happening individually with people. And I just believe that it's our, as you mentioned, I completely agree that it's our responsibility, that we don't even know our true power. We don't know our true influence on the world. And I said that in my first episode where I felt like everybody wants Black/African culture. Everybody wants it. There's something about it. You know, we are the Aboriginal people. And once we start to take ownership of that and we start to understand that, I mean, you may say the world wants us, but I actually think the world doesn't want us to. And because I actually would tell you that the world doesn't want us to figure it out and reconcile because of the power, because I believe that Wakanda could truly happen. You know, that's not just a figment of imagination. That's just not, you know, CGI. That's something that could possibly happen because we as Black people, we're everywhere. We're changing other people's worlds. We're impacting other people's lives. We've adopted to other people's, you know, spirituality, their religion. We've taken it, enhanced it, but we haven't yet seen what we can do for ourselves. So you just being able to paint that picture and just enlighten us with your knowledge and what you all are doing at ProMetro, bro, I just appreciate you taking this time. It was a conversation that was worthwhile.
Anytime, man.
Man, and I know we're going to do it again.
What you're doing, and by putting a word to what it is that we are doing, you're making it happen. Just that ability to create the philosophy, like we started talking about in the beginning. I appreciate you, brother. And if there are entities or powers in the world that don't want us to succeed, I ain't worried because the universe does.
Exactly.
So we're good. We're going to make this happen. We have our role to play in this generation, and it's going to take some time, but we're going to get there. And that's why we're having this conversation. I'll be happy to come back anytime and continue the good work, brother.
I appreciate you, bro, man. You have a good one. Regards to the family, and you take care, bro. And stay warm, bro. Well, you in Atlanta. I ain't even worried about it. I'm up in New York freezing, man. But you have a good time, bro.
Yeah, I'm good, man. You stay warm. All right, now.
All right, bro. Peace.
All right, bye.
The only thing that you can say is wow. Just wow. And that's going to do it for us here at My Black is Transnational. Hope you all enjoyed the interview with Dr. Bailey. Special shout out to Dr. Bailey. He's a special guy and what they're doing at ProMetro. If you have any feedback, please email us at blacktransnational17@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at blacktransnational_. So, we're going to sign off. Talk again soon. My name is Dr. Kaleji Bay Lamberts. My Black is Transnational, and I hope by the end of this, yours will be too. Peace.